Hey, the Regional Business Center is the host of today's event. And the Regional Business Center is a one-stop source for information and guidance on starting, expanding, and operating a business. They're proudly located in the Greater Sudbury, Espanola, Manitoulin, and Island regions. Located in Greater Sudbury, but they serve all of those other regions as well and the surrounding areas. And one of their main features is the confidential one-on-ones that they can offer businesses in the area. So they do consultations on anything you need, whether it's starting a business, help with registering a business plan support, market research, and more. So I really encourage you to visit the website at regionalbusiness.ca to take a look at all the services and events that they have coming up and to book that consultation if you're looking for support. And like I mentioned, there's a few upcoming events. Part of that is the Entrepreneurship Series. That is a rotating series of 5 different webinars. We have upcoming starting a small business for those who are just looking for an introduction on how do you begin. And then Business Model Canvas, that's happening on May 1st. And that's going to be sort of like how do you put a plan as like sort of like a one-page plan overview of your business. And then we also have, at the end of April, BEV and clean tech opportunities and resources for those who are kind of looking into getting into that domain. And then on May 8th, we have strong personal brand, infusing your personality into your marketing. That's also going to be a really interesting topic. So I really take a look at the website, register for these events. We hope to see you online again. And I'd like to introduce our speakers for today. We have, oh, I'm so sorry. I have your name incorrect. That's okay. She's right here, Julia Culpepper. So thank you so much from IPON Ontario. Julia is a senior program manager and learning strategist at Intellectual Property Ontario, specializing in helping entrepreneurs and arts leaders upskill and thrive. She has already built and implemented a full curriculum and measurement system for entrepreneurs and business leaders for the Innovation Asset Collective, a national nonprofit helping Canadian clean tech companies build IP and data strategies. Julia strongly believes that IP is a teachable and learnable skill and is a testament to that herself. She regularly gives presentations on IP, like today, most recently training over 200 mentors and executives and residents in BEIs, participating in an Elevate IP program in BC and Alberta, leading a workshop at the 2024 IGP Summit, and speaking at the 2023 Deloitte Fast 50 Summit. So welcome, Julia. Looks like you're going to be an incredible speaker today with all that experience, so that's wonderful. We also have Michael Colucci. And did I pronounce that correctly?
You did, yes.
Perfect, okay. Is an IP manager with Intellectual Property Ontario. He earned his PhD in microbiology from University of Waterloo. And after several years in the laboratory with Agriculture Canada, he made the move to intellectual property. So he has been a practicing patent agent for 20 years, having worked in both private practice and in-house, and has drafted and prosecuted patents across the spectrum of technology sectors. So prior to joining IPON, Michael was the manager of IP and IP strategy with Ontario-based automotive components. So welcome, Michael and Julia. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and please feel free to go ahead and share yours.
Thank you. Let me just do that. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Sure.
There we go.
Okay, great. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having us. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you so much for having us here to talk about IP, which is a topic that Mike and I are really fired up about, and it is not often the case that we have a room of people who are equally as fired up as we are. But hopefully by the end of this presentation, you will see the value in IP. You'll understand a little bit more about why it's important, why we think it's important, and maybe you'll want to join Intellectual Property Ontario too, because there's lots of benefits that we can offer for business leaders like yourselves. So without further ado, you know who we are already. I'm Julia. I'm the Senior Manager of Learning Strategy here at IPON. And here with my colleague Mike, we're going to take you through this sort of brief agenda. We're going to talk about why IP matters. We're going to talk about the different forms of IP rights. We're going to talk to you about IP strategy, the different components, key considerations, how you get started in building an IP strategy. And then we're going to talk about IPON and how we support clients and how you join. So to kick us off, we're going to talk about why IP matters. Why are we here? Why are we talking to you about IP and why now? And the fact that you're here is really is sort of a good thing because I feel like you are already kind of primed to see the value in it, but let's just kind of go through it a little bit. We are in an interesting moment as a country. I think that's probably an understatement, but let me kind of explain. Even before the tariff situation, we were already in a national moment of talking about Canada's productivity crisis and our sort of sluggish economy. Intellectual property is very much a tool that we as IP thinkers and leaders have been considering as something to help in this situation for a long time. And the government has too. In 2018, Canada kind of created this national IP strategy in order to spur the economy into prioritizing it as a business tool. And the reason behind that is kind of this slide in a nutshell. So Canada has been really good for a long time at a couple of different things. Resource extraction, of course, but also research and development. We have world-class universities, we have world-class research institutions at a federal and provincial level, and we're really, really good at creating really innovative products and ideas. We are not so good at commercializing those products and ideas. What tends to happen is we as taxpayers fund a lot of this research ourselves, but then that research, because we do not have properly scaled Canadian companies that can invest in those technologies and those innovations and commercialize them, that tends to happen elsewhere. So foreign companies will come in, scoop up our innovations, and commercialize them somewhere else. That means that the economic benefit of that commercialization never kind of comes back to being reinvested in our communities, hence the sluggish productivity, hence the sluggish economy. So intellectual property as a tool, particularly in this day and age, if you look at the S&P 500, which has taken a few hits over the last few days. But if you look at those companies, the one thing that they have in common is their value. 91% of it is tied up in intangible assets. So these are companies that have really prioritized IP and data and intangible assets as the future. All of their value is in that work that they do, the information economy, as we say. So this is something that as a country, we really want to kind of double down and invest in. That's the why. Mike has some pretty compelling stats, which I will let him take you through.
Okay, well, thank you, Julia. So it is well established that companies that manage their IP, they do have a higher level of performance compared to those who don't manage their IP. CIPO, that's the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, has some interesting facts to sort of back this up. So as stated here, companies that manage their IP, they're 3.6 times more likely to export, 1.9 times more likely to be of high growth, and are 35% more likely to seek out financing. Next slide, please. And of Canadian small and medium-sized enterprises that hold registered IP, they're 3 times more likely to expand domestically, and 4.3 times more likely to expand globally. So this is all sounds great, represents positive growth. However, the reality of the situation is that the engagement with the IP process in Canada is severely lacking. Across the country, only 9% of innovative companies have an IP strategy. And even then, oftentimes when they are queried on what is their IP strategy, they're really only describing what is a simple filing strategy. Okay, so really a lack there. Only 14% of companies with R&D functions hold or use patents. And once again, oftentimes the patents they hold may not be squarely directed upon their value proposition, incredibly problematic. And only 17% of companies believe that IP protection is needed, identifying an alarming gap with respect to IP awareness and the benefits that IP can provide? In particular, should they aspire to launch upon the global stage? Okay, so it is very alarming that despite the acknowledgement of the benefits that IP can provide, we have so little engagement with the process in Canada. So, when we're speaking about IP rights, we can move to the next slide. What do we mean by IP rights? Oh, I think there we go.
You got ahead of me there. Yeah, so what do we mean by IP rights exactly? It is not possible to own an idea, right? But it is actually possible to protect and own the expression or implementation of that idea. And the way you do that is through intellectual property rights. So when we say IP, generally speaking, the conversation about IP is, oh, that's patents, that's trademarks, that's copyrights. Like these are the terms that people throw around when we mean intellectual property. However, there's an important distinction here. Intellectual property itself is your ideas. It's the work that you do every day in your business, in your life, probably, and all the creative expression that you do day to day. That is your intellectual property. Intellectual property rights are your patents, your trademarks, your copyrights, and your industrial designs or design patents in the States. And these are legal protections that you can acquire to protect your intellectual property. So it's a subtle distinction, but it's a really important one to keep in mind because I think oftentimes people think of IP is only being generated in like the R&D land, like your inventors inventing something like a light bulb. That's not true. Everyone in a business generates IP. That goes down to your marketing team, that comes down to your sales team, like it's everyone. And the way that you protect it is myriad, actually. So you have your registrable rights, as mentioned. These are legal rights that you register in each government office per country. So like Mike mentioned, CIPO is the Canadian Intellectual Property Office. They're who you register IP with in Canada, but the US has their own USPTO and so on and so forth all over the world. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as well as IP is jurisdictional. Unregisterable IP rights are your things like trade secrets, data, and confidential information. These are things that are only valuable because of their secrecy. So of course you can't register them because then the secrecy evaporates, but they are still incredibly valuable. Most companies on this planet leverage these in order to boost their company value. And so it's a really important thing to keep in mind as well. But in a business, IP can appear in lots of different ways. Mike, why don't you take us through this table?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I would say that what constitutes IP is often underappreciated. When you're looking at items such as inventions, I think most often people will associate IP with inventions, and that would translate into a patent in terms of the IP rights. But with respect to, I'm going to say that oftentimes when I would meet with companies, particularly new startup type companies, and you ask them about what sorts of IP do you hold, what they fail to appreciate. I mean, oftentimes they will say, "Oh, we don't really have any IP. We're just sort of getting started." And what they fail to appreciate is that IP will also come in the form of domain names, business and product names, websites, social marketing, drawings, anything they've come up with to sort of support their business plan. This can all constitute intellectual property. Some of them will be unregisterable. So you're not really going to be registering in any way your know-how. Customer lists oftentimes are trade secrets, which are not generally registered. Formulas and ingredient lists. These are things that are also going to be maintained as trade secrets. So, when you are beginning to think about that process of, hey, I'm going to start a company, and you're there at the kitchen table, and you start that initial process of laying that out, you are developing and building intellectual property. Okay. Don't get fixated on strictly the patents and trademarks and all those IP rights. IP in its sort of fundamental sense, intellectual property, will be those creations that you are developing as you proceed down this journey. And it's important to recognize that all these various elements of, in terms of your business aspects, whether it's inventions and your website and so on, some may deserve legal protection. And so you have to, identify those so that way you can claim those as being exclusively yours. And where you might choose to engage a legal mechanism to claim exclusivity, the key is selecting the appropriate form of IP for the type of content you're looking to protect. Oftentimes, people might confuse patents and designs. You want to ensure that you are selecting the correct form of IP, and of course, a service professional, an IP professional, can guide you in that journey. And it's probably a good time to mention that, there is an order of operations that exists within the world of IP, particularly IP rights in particular. And I would say most often associated with patents. Without getting too deep into the weeds, the world of patents generally requires what is called absolute novelty. That is, you cannot have disclosed the invention publicly, prior to filing a patent application. What this means is that should you wish to make a disclosure of the technology, it's always a good idea to seek out the services of an IP professional who can guide you and to ensure that you can proceed with your disclosures without disrupting your ability to pursue patent protection. Oftentimes, that's through the preparation and submission of say, like a provisional patent application. But it's always good to have that discussion with an IP professional to ensure that you are not creating any obstacles to pursuing patent protection. So just one of the takeaways is ultimately disclosures have to be handled very carefully. And should you wish to be making a disclosure on anything that relates to an invention, seek out the advice of a patent professional who can then steer you along that path in a safe manner. Okay. We are on the IP lifecycle. Awesome. All right. So in general, the intellectual property lifecycle follows this progression. That is initial development, followed by protection, and eventual commercialization. So during this development phase, there's going to be a number of fundamental questions, such as, do you in fact own your IP? All right, this might seem strange, but oftentimes I've seen instances where foundational subject matter upon which a company is building their product was in fact the basis of, say, a research project at an institution, at a university, for example. And the question arises, do you in fact have a right to use that subject matter? And questions around this, may also arise when you're incorporating, say, open source software, right? So into your work product, have you made a determination on any licenses that you may require to ensure that you can rightfully use, say, the source code in question? So these are things you need to think about during that development phase. In the protection phase, you need to ensure that you have a means to capture innovation within your company. You also want to ensure that you have a mechanism to evaluate this, okay, and to prioritize those that are important. Now, how do you determine what would be important? Well, a number of factors can contribute to this assessment, but one that is extremely important is whether or not the technology in question aligns to your business strategy. So to ensure a more successful path to commercialization, it's critical that your IP pursuits and your IP strategy in general are aligned to your business strategy. Okay, and to further support this, using things like market intelligence and implementing an appropriate filing strategy or management system, say for trade secrets, is extremely important. Okay, so that's the protection phase. And again, we're just touching on a few points that contribute to these various phases. These are sort of the high level sort of aspects that you must consider. Finally, with respect to commercialization, essentially how does your IP factor into your business plan, and how is this IP going to improve your competitive position relative to your competitors? How will you monetize on the IP? Will you be proceeding directly to market or looking for licensing opportunities? Will the IP in question open the door to new partnership possibilities, which could further drive value into your company? So these are the various aspects that are part of that overall IP life cycle. Moving on. Okay, now IP ownership. I've already mentioned, some of the challenges that can arise with respect to ownership, and I've seen all too often instances where the question of ownership hasn't arisen until much later in the IP life cycle, sometimes as late as the commercialization phase or stage, and this needs to be done up front. I've seen instances where one's ownership of technology has not come into question until they've entered litigation, because oftentimes a means by which a defendant will look to defend their position if they're accused of infringement is they'll try to invalidate the patent that's being asserted against them. And one of the ways to address that is to challenge the ownership, looking for any breakdowns in that ownership chain of title, right? So these things need to be determined early upfront in the process. So, when IP is being investigated, when it's being registered, the company should immediately have the employees execute what is known as a patent assignment, which has the effect of transferring ownership of the IP to the company. Now, the obligation of the employee to do this is often laid out in an employment agreement. So oftentimes as an express assignment. It'd be part of their employment agreement. So really, it should not be a surprise to the employee that they are being presented with this requirement to sign over the rights to the company. And for added certainty, oftentimes, even though it may be expressly stated in the employment agreement, it's generally a good idea to follow it with an additional confirmatory assignment, which will contain additional assignment. Well, essentially, it's confirming what was in the employment agreement, and that is that the employee assigns ownership of that IP over to the company. It's important that that be done upfront, and it's not left to just sort of be addressed later on the chain. One of some of the issues that have arisen in companies that I've provided assistance to is employees come and go, and if you are not staying on top of this, what can happen is you may find yourself in a position where you need to, let's say you're selling the IP, and again, the chain of title needs to be clearly stated, and you find that the IP is not even in the name of the company, but now you are challenged to locate where that inventor has gone, or they may be uncooperative. So it's always good to have all these things done up front when you have the inventor with the employee there in front of you. And the last point here is extremely important. As IP ownership does not equate to an ability to use or freedom to operate. Take, for example, a patent. So when you're granted a patent, it gives you the right to exclude others from making, using, and selling the invention. Whether or not you yourself have the right to make, use, and sell the invention, that still requires an assessment against any existing prior art that remains active and enforceable that may encompass the technology in question. So, consider a light bulb, all right? In particular, let's say you're developing a type of LED light bulb. Light bulbs are certainly not new, and LED technologies, have certainly been around for some time. So while your development of an LED light bulb may meet the requirements for patentability, maybe there's novel aspects, there's inventiveness, and there's utility, there may still be patents for, say, conventional light bulbs, or more likely LED technologies that have been written sufficiently broad so as to encompass any form of implementation, and including what you are proposing to do. So in a situation such as that, you may have to seek out a license from that foundational patent holder. And with respect to jurisdiction, IP is jurisdictional, as mentioned. So your pursuit of, say, a patent will have to be done largely on a country by country basis. Important to note is that there are certain filing vehicles that would facilitate this process. And again, I'm not going to go into the weeds, but should you be in that position, an IP service provider can certainly highlight the various options available to you to explore how you would approach, a multiple country filing strategy. All right, next slide.
So you're probably correctly assuming by now that most of IP is administrative and it's a lot of paperwork. And it is not actually very glamorous. However, the thing that will facilitate making a lot of this easier is a strategy. Because, of course, IP is not a monolith, as you've seen. There's lots of different types of IP rights. There's lots of different steps in each right as well in order to secure ownership, and also what to do with that right once you've acquired it. So an IP strategy is essentially it's a plan. That's all. It's just a plan. It's a plan for managing your intangible assets, your IP rights, and it's supposed to support your business strategy. So your business strategy is driving everything in your business. I saw one of the upcoming workshops is for a business model canvas. This is the thing that will get you to create a business strategy that works for your company. And then an IP strategy is something that can layer on top of that and consider all of the different uses IP can do for your business. So what it should do is balance risk and opportunity. By that, I mean the risk side, which is just the sort of straight up protection of your assets, like what Mike was saying, the right to exclude others from making, using, or selling the thing that you're protecting. But it's also has to balance the opportunity side. And that is, think of the light bulb, you need a license for something. The opportunity side is how can you use your IP as a business tool? It's an asset like any other. It goes on your books like any other tool, any other asset, but it's also valuable. So if you can use that to generate new partnership opportunities, generate investment, your IP strategy should include the sort of opportunity side of the coin as well. Most IP experts agree there's three kind of main considerations for creating an IP strategy. And it's a Venn diagram for a reason. They are all equally balanced here. The first is your market need. So what is the customer need? What problem in the market are you trying to solve? Another is your product differentiator. So what makes your company different? What is the thing that makes you stand out in a very potentially crowded space, but makes customers want to choose you to solve that unmet customer need? And then the other one, which is, IP specific, is what IP rights are actually available. Most people call this white space. I don't love the term, but every IP expert will know what you mean when you say that. And it essentially means what IP rights are left, what haven't people filed. And so if you are developing something in a market that is sort of competitive, it's quite possible that other competitors, even if you think that you've created something super novel, and it's ticked all your boxes, it does set you apart, but then you do a bit of a market scan, a patent landscape search, for example, and then you find out that a bunch of competitors have filed rights in exactly that area, then perhaps it's no longer important for you to invest heavily in that thing because you know that you're going to be blocked at some point. An IP strategy is basically just a way for you to invest your potentially limited resources wisely. So your resources in terms of personnel, but also money, of course. Everyone is strapped for cash as a startup, and time. Sometimes IP rights take a long time to file. Patents can take 18 months, 2 years more to be issued, depending on what it is. These things take a long time. And so investing wisely is really important. If you're trying to aim for the center, particularly in the early days, the center of these three kind of bubbles, that's generally the best approach when you're trying to balance limited resources and availability, because you know that if you manage to hit in the middle of these three things for your business, that's going to drive value. And if you think of the flip side, why would I need to protect something? If you can find something that does hit squarely in the middle, why wouldn't you want to protect that? Why would you want to leave it open for someone else to come in and take from you, right? So if it does drive your business's value that much, it is probably worth investing in. The other thing to mention is that IP strategies should consider a layered approach of IP. IP strategy is not just patents. It's all of those things we mentioned early on. It's trademarks, it's copyright. All of these things have different sort of cost centers too. So it's important to consider how you can take your technology or your innovation as a whole and use different kinds of IP rights to layer and protect different components of it, such that you have a better kind of lattice of protection. It's also important to mention what an IP strategy is not. We hear this all the time. An IP strategy should not be siloed. So an IP strategy in a business should always have a line of sight to the business strategy. If it does not, it probably will not be effective because it won't support what your business actually considers to be valuable. It shouldn't be outsourced exclusively. So if you hire a service provider to say, hey, write me an IP strategy without actually contributing to that process, it probably won't be valuable for you. You have to do some of this upfront thinking with them or on your own before you approach an IP service provider. It's also more than just some of its parts. So we hear a lot of businesses coming to us and saying, nah, I'm good. Like I've made everybody sign NDAs. I don't need an IP strategy. Or no, I'm fine. Like I have an IP policy. And those things are important considerations and maybe parts of an IP strategy, but individually, they do not an IP strategy make. And the last piece of this is it's not a one and done exercise. Like I said, if your business strategy is evolving, so should your IP strategy.
Mm-hmm. And actually, with that last point, the one and done, and the need to continuously review, if you don't mind going back to the previous slide, just because I like Venn diagrams so much.
Sure.
There you go.
I do too. Clearly.
It's important to realize that these three components, the market need, product differentiator, and IP rights available, these are not static. These move over time. And as these move, they will have an influence on your business strategy, and therefore your IP strategy needs to stay in alignment to that. I've worked in some industries where the market need is so static, it doesn't change. So if you come up with a product differentiator, it can be relevant for the entire 20-year duration of your patent's lifespan. And in some of those cases, companies are nearing, they're in that 18th, 19th year, and now they suddenly realize that there's going to be all sorts of competitors that can now jump, into sort of their area of exclusivity because it's running out. And so you need to have that foresight to know that if you're dealing in a marketplace that is very static and your product differentiator can no longer be captured as being exclusively yours because your IP rights are going to run out, you're going to need to find another product differentiator that has available white space, that has available IP rights, so you can further secure exclusivity. Often that will come in the form of improvements. So it's important to realize there's change that can easily occur in this area. I mean, the market need in most industries does change quite readily. And as that changes, if you're hanging onto a product differentiator for a market that is no longer relevant, really, how is that ultimately going to, give you sort of a long-term plan to, to being successful? It's impossible. So you have to make sure that you keep a close eye on these three aspects and how they may be shifting, and the IP strategy and your business strategy will constantly need alignment to ensure that you're focused on that sweet spot, your value proposition, which I like to call value-driven innovation management. However you're choosing to steer your innovation, you're picking those that are geared towards driving value into the company. Okay, so heading back to the other slide. In terms of, so Julia mentioned what a IP strategy is not. I mean, what an IP strategy should, as I've mentioned, and I like to repeat this over and over again because it's so critical, it needs to be aligned to your business strategy, okay? That alignment is going to ensure that your IP pursuits have a path to commercialization, okay? You don't want to be committing funds to IP pursuits simply because you've created something. That was an approach that was used by many companies for decades and decades. We created this, we are going to patent it. And it might speak to your innovation capacity, but if it's not actually working its way towards commercialization, really, how are you going to have a return on that investment made into that technology? Okay, so you do need that alignment, and it is a proactive approach to IP management. Okay, so ensuring that your IP strategy covers aspects such as IP capture, protection, maintenance, and commercialization. You'll have a plan or roadmap in place that allows you to make smart decisions as opposed to being merely reactive when issues present themselves. I often like to say to clients, operating without an IP strategy would be like going on a road trip to a brand new destination without a map or a GPS. I mean, I do that all the time, fine, but it's when you're dealing that. I mean, okay, actually, we'll take it further. Ultimately, on that sort of trip, you'll probably find that consume more resources, more gas, these various things. Maybe you had to stop for lunch, which I'd always enjoy, but ultimately that would be equivalent to an unnecessary spend of IP dollars when you could have been far more efficient with a more directed approach because you had a proactive plan in place from the beginning. Okay. And, again, it goes without saying that the IP strategy should drive opportunity by the company by contemplating how your IP is going to be used. Okay, so whether it's to generate revenue, to establish those partnerships that could drive value or new opportunities, or to provide leverage in legal situations. There are times when you want to build a portfolio to enable you to do a bit of horse trading in the event that there are some conflicting sort of scenarios that might come to light. All right, so these are various ways in which you can put your IP strategy to good use.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide.
I was just going to say, we are both scenic route type people, and the fact that we are saying you need a plan, that's saying something. So
there you go.
So I just want to shift gears a little bit and talk about IPON and how we support clients, and also, how do you join? What makes you eligible? We've talked a lot about the various forms of IP. Of course, there's like so many different steps into protecting your intellectual property. We help with all of it. So, it can be overwhelming, I think, if you're kind of trying to navigate the system on your own. So, as part of the National IP Strategy, and then from that, there's been a provincial effort to seriously kind of dig in and help support innovators. And so IPON was created in 2022. We're a pretty new baby organization, but we're a government agency. So we're kind of government, but not. We're a little bit more helpful, I would say, because we do direct supports. So if you join as a client, we help you with various IP services, which we'll get into in a second, and support and just that are tailored at Ontario businesses to help you innovate and grow, which is pretty exciting.
Mm. And a key driver, and I believe IPON is very successful in achieving this, is to ultimately enhance Ontario's IP landscape. Okay, so through IPON's range of services, we are enhancing Ontario's ability to compete in the knowledge-based economy and support job creation, which places our province in a more competitive position. Next slide.
So if you join as an IPON client, you do learn how to do several things. You learn how to maximize the value of your IP. So you get to dig in and kind of reassess your business and kind of your IP. How do you kind of leverage the maximum value of it? We also strengthen your capacity to grow, primarily through funding, which we'll get into in a second. You'll learn how to compete in the global market. You'll kind of develop some skills, but also like have access to tools that help you figure out your global positioning and enhance your commercialization outcomes. That's through all of the things that we've talked about today, learning how to build an IP strategy, but also, we've got several strategic partners that we do kind of reciprocal arrangements with, like Greater Sudbury. Thank you for having us. But Greater Sudbury, the RIC system will help you kind of balance your IP supports with the rest of your business supports and figure out a path forward for you.
Okay, so IPON isn't alone within this IP ecosystem, but really what makes IPON different, say, compared to the others? So we have the most incredible dedicated account managers working tirelessly for our clients. These account managers are with you every step of the way and can be reached for questions or concerns that you may have. They're there to guide you and ensure that you make effective and efficient use of everything IPON has to offer. Once you're in, which is wonderful. Once you become a client, you will have access to a broad range of services, most importantly, an extensive library of educational resources, for example, to provide you with the IP awareness. You need to ensure your IP journey is fruitful and drives value into your company. And the broad range of IP support services, which we keep making reference to, and we shall get to in a moment, continue to evolve as we constantly search for new ways to enhance the client experience. And with respect to these support services, it's extremely satisfying to receive feedback. And we receive a lot of feedback from our clients who have indicated just how instrumental all this has been to enable and I like to say empower them to make the right IP decisions. I like the clients to feel like they're in control of their destiny and they're not solely at the hands of an IP professional, which can be I'm an IP professional. I'm not a scary guy. But the thing is, when you go into a downtown law firm, patent firm, and you're talking a language that is difficult to comprehend because IP law can be very convoluted, we want you to go in there with a sense of knowledge and awareness so that way you are empowered to be in control of that conversation.
Nobody knows your business better than you. So you have to be able to become a good advocate for what your business is trying to drive. And so you can kind of, stand up for yourself in those kinds of conversations.
All right. So one more slide that's making reference to this broad range of services. So what do these ultimately look like? And yes, we're finally there. We offer IP benchmarking. So benchmarking is a requirement for all clients and is used to establish a client's IP health and awareness. The benchmarking exercise takes approximately an hour to complete and has the client answering questions, a series of questions in relation to IP management framework. There's IP strategy, IP management of innovative processes, and IP rights management. It's a bunch of various categories. Essentially, the goal is to tailor how you will proceed along your IP journey to enhance your competitive advantage, to build your competitive advantage. IP benchmarking will also provide a mechanism whereby you can assess your growth as you continue to build your IP awareness.
Mm-hmm. And how you build your IP awareness and literacy is through education. So I am a learning strategist. My whole kind of job at IPON is creating IP curriculum. I do strongly believe that IP is a teachable skill. It's sometimes convoluted, but I think with the right learning path, you can learn it all. And we're not trying to train you to be IP experts. If you want to become a patent agent or a trademark agent, there are lots of different avenues to do that. We're trying to create business-centric IP resources to really help increase the IP literacy and IP maturity of business leaders in Ontario. To learn the skill sets that relate to business. So how do you make IP relevant for your business? How do you train your staff? How do you learn the best way of navigating a landscape? How do you seek information about IP and in your market that actually makes sense for you and is relevant? If you're experiencing an IP issue, how do you find the resources that are tailored to you in that moment? That's kind of our niche. That's our avenue. We try to develop things that are sort of just-in-time resources. By that, I mean, we've talked a lot about how you build your IP strategy, how you kind of keep track of your assets. How do you file a patent? How do you file a trademark? We actually provide the resources to get you started. We hear a lot from innovators that they're like, okay, I get the value, I get kind of what I have to do, at least in the short term, but I don't know what to actually write down on a piece of paper. We provide the papers, we provide the templates, we provide the tools, and we provide some modules and access to experts like Mike to help you actually kind of figure it all out. We also do some events. So we do things like this all the time. If you're a client, you'll get access to all of these things. We're kind of in the community. We'll be at Discovery X in a week or two, and things like that. So we're always kind of bumping around.
All right. Funding. We, of course, provide access to funding, which is very popular with most of our clients. IPON will cover up to 80% of eligible costs based on approved scopes of work. Okay, so this is, of course, is in relation to forward looking work only, nothing retroactive. Clients can choose to use their own service provider or select one of IPON's or to select one from IPON's roster of service providers who are either licensed IP lawyers or registered patent agents. And clients may use their funding to a wide range of eligible services. And that's on the next slide. All right, so as you can see here, the eligible services encompasses a wide range of IP-related tasks, including we've got IP surveys and audits to assess your current state of your IP holdings, both registered and unregistered, much of which may not be recognized. It can be placed towards development and implementation of an IP strategy, or maybe towards competitive analysis, which may include preparation of competitive landscapes or associated analytics. IP registration, right, including IP drafting and filing. This is the biggie. This is where we will provide funding to cover the cost of having a patent application drafted, for example, or a trademark application prepared. It will cover also the filing costs, so government fees, not only in Canada, but also in foreign jurisdictions. So if you already have a international application in place, we call them PCTs, and you're approaching that point where you need to enter nationally into a variety of countries, those foreign costs with engaging foreign counsel and the foreign fees, we will cover that as well. And that really is been a massive support for our clients. We support a range of contractual supports as they relate to IP. So, licensing, preparing various sorts of agreements, as long as they've got an IP component to it, it may qualify, as well as a variety of other IP related disbursements that may be charged. Now, of course, there are going to be some costs that cannot be included. Generally, those are going to be administrative costs, expenses, taxes, as well as fees associated with the maintenance of an issued patent or IP in general, generally annuities. Also not covered are costs associated with patent enforcement and litigation. We do not get involved at all with costs associated with those sorts of scenarios. Now, eligibility to benefit from all that IPON has to offer, you must meet certain eligibility requirements to become a client. So first, you must be an Ontario-based small or medium-sized entity, that is one with fewer than 500 employees. You must operate in Ontario and intend to grow the business in Ontario. Okay. You must own or be an exclusive licensee of the IP you intend to commercialize. And you must be able to articulate how you envision your company bringing social or economic benefits to the province. And importantly, you need to show a certain degree of financial capacity to protect and commercialize your IP with some assistance from IPON, of course, keeping in mind that funding does require you to have some skin in the game, all right? And that's why there is that 80-20 reimbursement model. You are responsible to pay 20%. And as you can appreciate, IP costs can be fairly steep. So you need to demonstrate that you have a certain degree of financial capacity to manage that side of your commitment. Now, served sectors. Served sectors, all right, we have them listed here. I won't go through them in detail, but I just want to point out a couple of recent additions, those being clean tech and agri-tech. And I mention that because, should you be in a sector that is not currently served, not currently listed here, I would still suggest you reach out to express your interest, because it may influence where we go next with respect to any additions. And I do feel that clean tech and agri-tech were the result of that, because I believe it was last year at Discovery X, almost every other client that came to us belonged in these sectors, and we really, advocated for their inclusion. So should you be in a sector that's not part of this, please let us know and we'll see what we can do.
Mm-hmm.
Next. All right. So please check us out. And if it seems like a good fit for you, please go ahead and apply. Next. All right. So we are approaching our 3rd-year anniversary, I believe. In the short time, we've made substantial impacts. We've distributed over $19 million to 8 colleges, 10 universities, and I'd say impressively to over 800 clients. Do one more click there. Oh, there you go. And indeed.
Yes, you could.
And the big journal, and you could be next.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
Well, thank you for listening to our presentation. And we're happy to take questions. We have a few minutes left if you want to put them in the chat or the Q&A. We'll leave these QR codes on the screen too. Please use them. You can join IPON. You can just follow us, join our mailing list. They're all here and available for you.
Okay, so thank you so much. We have 2 questions in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get started? I'm guessing we follow one of these QR codes.
Yes, you do. You follow the QR code, join, apply. As Mike said, even if you don't think you fit the box, reach out anyway, just because you never know. Like the sectors are, of course, very generic. Like there's lots of nuance involved in them. If you don't know if you quite fit, there's more information on our website, or you can just sort of reach out to the team and we can help you.
Wonderful. And does IP have any connection with trademarking?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a trademark is a form of IP right. It can be used to cover, your logo, your branding. It is definitely a type of IP that IPON supports through our funding model. So absolutely, trademarking.
It's a great thing to do if you're just getting started as well, because every business has a name. Every product has a name. Oftentimes, what we tell people is make sure that you do not invest a lot of resources until you've searched those names in a trademark registry in the markets you want to operate in, because you never know. Like people can file stuff and never use them. And the way that trademarks work in terms of like it's a class system, so it's all kind of sector based, if I can make that generic enough. And so if you apply for a trademark in one class, it could be the same name or same colors or something as a trademark in a different class, but it's not confusing to a customer, so it doesn't matter. But what you don't want to have happen is you deciding on a company name, for example, and then investing resources in branding and getting your name splashed all over your products and stuff like that, and then finally going to register a trademark and going, oh no, somebody already has it. So it's a good thing to do in the early days, and they're not expensive.
For sure. How much will it roughly cost to obtain intellectual property protection for an electronic product? And I'm assuming they mean a patent here.
Okay. It's hard to say. I mean, it's hard to give you an exact number. Okay. So I have in the past given people sort of a ballpark overall cost to pursue a patent from initial filing all the way through to eventual granting of the patent, which can take 3, maybe 4 years, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter. That number I have placed in the range of $30,000 to $50,000, okay, which might seem steep. Drafting oftentimes can cost between $10,000 to $15,000. You do have your filing fees, and you would then have a series of costs associated with a bit of back and forth with the patent office. Your patent goes through an examination phase. We call that prosecution, where you do rely heavily on supports from your IP professional, as they will oftentimes address the queries from the patent office using case law to back up arguments. And, if it flows through easily through the patent office, your cost can come in at the low end of the scale. And if you're dealing with a space which is highly populated with prior art, and there's a lot of art that's cited against you, and there's a lot of back and forth, it can easily exceed $50,000. But I don't want you being scared off by those costs. I mean, it's a good idea always to, if you think you've got something there, have a discussion with the service provider as they can look at the specifics of your situation and to give you a better sense of what these costs could be. But that's ballpark.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, like we cover, as Mike was mentioning before, we cover a lot of those, particularly filing and drafting fees up front. And so I mean, we're not alone in this space. There's lots of other IP funding initiatives out there in Canada right now, and take advantage because, I don't know if they're all going to be around forever. And I think that now is a really good time to invest in this if you haven't thought about it already.
Yeah,
For
absolutely.
sure.
20 years ago when I started in patents, there was no support such as,
Yeah.
such as IPON. If you didn't have the funds to proceed, you basically, had to make a very difficult decision. The fact that there's support now is incredible. So,
Mhm.
while it's here, hopefully it's here forever.
Yep.
Take advantage of it. Explore all the options in this IP sort of ecosystem that IPON is a part of.
Yeah. And just as we were saying before, like patents aren't everything. If you think that you can't afford a patent right now, even though you really want one and you think it's going to like really drive value for your business, think about what we were saying before. Like you can stage some of this stuff out. Think about a lattice of rights. Think about all the different types of IP, like trademarks, like copyright, like trade secrets, keeping your information confidential as long as possible to derive value from whatever you're doing. If you're in stealth mode or what have you, like think about using all of those different forms of IP as a kind of like grand scope of protection. It's not all just throw all your eggs in one patent basket necessarily. So be creative.
Absolutely.
I see one question coming in, but I have a quick question. Is there any kind of sector when it comes to applying for a patent, or sector or type of patent that, is easier to apply for and go through the process?
Okay. So I've always been under the impression that mechanical arts tends to be a little bit more straightforward because the analysis tends to be a little more visual, as compared to, say, ones that fall more in the realm of software applications,
AI.
pharma, AI,
Yeah.
definitely. So, for those that are, more mechanical, and again, when I worked in automotive, a lot of them were very much mechanical based. Uh, they tend to flow through a little bit easier. Whereas in the pharma sector, in the pharma side of things, I mean, part of the problem with pharma and the patent system is oftentimes it can take 10 plus years to get a patent issued. They've already consumed half of the effective lifespan of the patent when they may be given, when it may grant. And those, that's probably the opposite end of the spectrum, where it's more challenging. It's I would say at a very sort of simplistic level, I would say that mechanical patents are easier. AI, maybe medtechs, not medtechs, pharma fall in at the opposite end.
Great information. Thank you for sharing. We have one final question here that we'll take. What other support options are available for IP protection in Ontario? Is there a shortcut and alternative way to commercialize a product while the IP process is still ongoing?
Okay, so some of the other support options available for IP protection in Ontario. So, if you're speaking about other I guess, agencies or players within the IP ecosystem. We used to have an IP ecosystem map. I don't believe that's currently
We're
available.
redoing it. So we'll
We're-
put it back on our website in a couple weeks actually. But
yeah,
there's quite a few. Like there's Elevate IP. That is a national program, but it has regional supports. So in Ontario, Communitech is the hub that is kind of steering that. But they've partnered with Invest Ottawa and North Forge, I believe, to kind of disseminate that stuff. They do webinars all the time, but they also have funding available. Other than that, if you're clean tech, there's the Innovation Asset Collective. If you are just a technology company, you can go through NRC and their IP Assist program. You can look that up. It is not easy to find information out about that program, but you can call and get in touch with them and they can kind of put you through the assessment process. But they do very tailored support and funding.
yeah. And with respect to shortcuts or an alternative way to commercialize product while the IP process is still ongoing. I mean, essentially the nice thing about the IP process is once you engage the IP process through a provisional patent application, you have an element of protection over the subject matter contained within that provisional patent application. So you can initiate that process of exploring alignment to the business strategy, how it's going to generate the competitive advantage for the company, how it's going to build value, how it's going to make you money from the moment that you engage the IP process. You don't have to wait until you are granted a patent. In terms of a shortcut on commercialization, I think that really just comes down to hard work, understanding the market and doing your homework, and engaging all the various supports around you, not just for IP support, but for, let's say, mentorship or for business supports. Those sorts of supports, I believe, will be ones that will help you steer down a path that is, more efficient and effective to achieve your goals.
Excellent, excellent presentation. Thank you so much for today. That's all the time we have. So this video is recorded. It will be going up on our website soon. And I can share it as well with anybody who wasn't here today. Again, big thank you to our speakers. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Thank